Hello, everybody. Welcome back for our Monday edition. Morning. Good morning. Happy Monday of the Talking Stick. I'm Jess, and here I am. Uh, it looks like somebody's here waiting. Thank you so much, whoever that is, for joining me. Today, we're going to lighten it up a bit and talk about something that I found interesting, and I was really excited with all the information that I was able to, or what information I was able to find. I actually was pretty impressed by. So it's the history of tattooing as a human expression, and as someone who is tattooed myself, I thought it would be an interesting topic. So let's dive in. There's a lot of notes today. It's history, so it's like I'm not gonna try to memorize all of this, but I did do a bunch of research and I did post photos. If you're interested, go ahead and look into my posts on YouTube, and there's a few photos that I thought were really interesting. So, truly, nobody can really be sure. I'm gonna put my glasses on so I can read. No one can really be sure of exactly when tattooing, really started. There's evidence 40,000 years back from the in the upper Paleolithic era, the Stone Ages, uh, that that there was tattooing happening. And I mean, depending on where you fall in, like what you believe historically, I mean, I don't know. I think at one point, history told me that um, basically, I don't know, Sumerians were the initial culture or whatever. But if you look a little deeper, it doesn't really look like that's true. I mean, they have cave paintings in France, and they find evidence of human history much further back, right? So, of course, the 40,000 years ago, it's evidence, it's not actual proof. So they found bone tattoo tools and pigments, um, you know, dating back that far. So it, but the actual history of actual proof comes from mummified, corpses. I would love to be mummified, to be honest. Like, I wish that was something we could do here. I'd totally build my own tomb. Obsessed with Egyptian history, so that will be an episode as well. So let's see. It says 5,000 years ago, on average is what they're looking at, and all over the world as well. So they think that the first tattoos were actually created by accident. Likely, someone would get a wound, and they would rub, something onto their skin, and then it would heal and hold the color of that, or the substance that they rubbed in would then be permanent in their skin. So, they decided to start using them for all types of expressions, and it's a variable. I mean, it seems like in some cultures it was like a sign of royalty. In some, it was, used to mark your status as well. So at some points, I guess, low birth, people would not be tattooed. And then on the flip side, it became something that only criminals and, some type of punishment or marking for what you may have done, to let society know. So I think it's super interesting. It actually comes from a Polynesian Tahitian combination of words, the word ta meaning to strike something, and forgive me if I mispronounce any of these, because honestly, there's some pretty difficult words in this. Tatau, which means to mark something. So let's start off with what was the first, where do they think it really began? So they think that it was between 3370 and 3100 BC. It's Otzi, the Iceman, was discovered as a mummy with 57 oddly placed tattoos. And I don't know what oddly placed means. I think that's relative. So, um, it included a cross. Okay, now we're talking well before Christianity. Um, so I'm really interested into like what type of cross this was, but let's see, lines running straight down over the kidneys, parallel lines running across the ankles. Um, Researchers are assuming that these were in medical reference because they did align with like acupuncture sites. So they possibly believe that it could heal ailments like arthritis, and other issues that they may have been having with their health. Um, so yeah, many mummies have been found near Egypt and actually Russia. It looks like there's quite a history when it comes, down to, the Russian culture as well, that goes far further back than the aforementioned dates. So, let's go into just a little bit about the instruments that they used. It seems like there's like a really cool, they were very inventive, right? And I love making things out of natural stuff like bones, stones, sticks, crystals, anything natural. Like I'm really, as an artist, really into that. So I love this part. It looks like that, uh, instruments ranging from, metal, bronze, and bone were used. And they look like wide, flattened, like needle type instruments. Um, and they would tie them together to provide a repeating pattern of multiple dots. So it's like, obviously the stick and poke style of that we call now would be probably much more at this point resembling what they were doing at that time. It says that the skin is pricked in a desired pattern. Uh, it looks like in some cultures in Egypt, they would mix the ash or the soot of wood or oil mixed with the milk, breast milk, uh, and would begin with women in Egypt. It was primarily women, and it would begin at the age of 5 or 6, which I find really amazing. And it also is something that would be relative to the gypsy women as well. And when we go into the Egyptian history, we will talk a little bit about the concept that gypsies are actually kind of like a spiritual sect of Egyptian lineage, or it's thought so, or initially, right? And then they travel. I mean, it's like they travel to protect the Book of Thoth is sort of the legend. So I find that super interesting. Anyhow, um, it looks like that, again, it was mostly geometrical or patterned symbology. So there were, occasional images of like gods and, things like that as well. So let's see. Now, Egyptian, let's draw back because that is some of the initial uh, evidence of tattooing was in Egypt. So, like I said before, it seemed to be mostly during the purely dynastic period, pre 332 BC. It was commonly women. And it looks like it was sort of like used to safeguard during birth. As we know, birthing has always been the biggest risk to women's lives. It still is, actually, as weird as that is with all the medical technology and stuff that we have now. Um, it was, is and was one of the most dangerous things we do as women, right? It's well worth it, but, back then I would say that it was super dangerous. So they would use tattooing to adorn the bodies of women in the areas, breasts, belly, thighs were the predominant areas. So the mummified remains of women of the indigenous Sea group culture have been found in cemeteries near Kaban, which is an area in Russia, um, as far back as 2000 to 15,000 BC. So I find that super interesting. They had blue tattoos. Again, you know, looking like they were all around the abdomen, and like they would create this pattern on the belly, on an unpregnant belly, of dots. And then as the belly stretched, the dots would encompass sort of like, a netting to hold it in, so maybe to prevent like premature birth, or in their way to, symbolically protect the baby. Um, then the male leaders also began towards 13 to 1100 BC to show with geometrical tattoos on their arms and legs, and mythical animals as well. In Siberia, a 2,400-year-old body of a male was discovered with his entire limbs and torso covered in mythical animals. I thought that was so cool. So, you know, uh, and again, a woman was also discovered with some similar stuff, mythical creatures on her shoulders, wrists, and thumb. I actually posted a picture of a hand that had some really cool hand tattoos. That was like a farmer, an ancient farming community. So I thought that was sort of cool. So again, it's a variable when it comes to ancient history, what the purpose was, and where they put them and what they did. So I think, that's super interesting, right? So, then it's like the Greeks, recollection, um, is that tattoos were a mark of nobility. And like I was saying earlier, not to have them was a testimony of low birth. So, you know, there's also the Maori culture, which I find super interesting. I'm going to post some more photos for you guys, and so that you can really, kind of look at these pictures, because to me it's like super fascinating, right? But the Maori culture actually, tattoo their faces, um, as an art form, um, and it's actually become more popular again now in the more common time. But they can, it's called a tamoko, and it's actually communicating about their tribe, their ancestral lineage, stories of their family, and kind of where they are in the current social culture and structure. So, yeah, that's super interesting. And no two are alike. This is my favorite part. This is like one of my favorite aspects. It's all over. Excuse me. Allergies. It's happening. Maori men, have their entire face covered, and the women would actually have it mostly on their chin, their upper lip, nostrils, maybe forehead. But again, none of them are ever the same. They're almost a language of expression, about who that person is and who their family is. So I think that's really, really cool. I like that a lot. I mean, am I rushing out to get a face tattoo? Likely not, but still very cool. So let's go into, oh my gosh, I totally skipped over the tools. Let me talk about that really quick. Of course, I said the bone and the metal, but there was also a super interesting way of doing it with like cactus quill and yucca leaves. That in the New Mexico and the American, North American culture, uh, it was like two cactus spines, with split yucca leaves. So it's with like a skunk bush sumac handle, And again, it's like they were the quills were black on the ends, from the ink. So again, it was similar to the ones that we were speaking of earlier with the metal and the bone, but it included like cactus quills, and these natural plants, natural points, which I mean, I just find that so resourceful and I love it so much. So let's go back into history of it. Japanese, the Asian cultures, China, Asia, Japan, also date back really far into history with their tattoo culture. And of course, there's Japanese men began to adorn their bodies with elaborate tattoos, um, more closer into where we're at now, AD, the third century AD. Um, but mummies in China and stuff were also discovered prior to that. Seemingly, it was one of those situations where it was criminals, mostly criminals. So, um, yeah, like I just find this super interesting, truly. And there's so much information. So, I really encourage everyone to, if you find this interesting, to really look into uh, you know, this history some more. There's so much, to read about that I find super, you know, super awesome. So the Native American cultures, I love this one. And so for me, let me just side note. So this one, that one, and this one on my thumb are all done with ink mixed with the ashes of Eden. And each year that I spend on this earth here without her, I will continue on this arm, to kind of just decorate this whole side, the side of my heart, and the ribs and everything with those. And so this one really, I was like, this is going to be my next one. I think this next year. So indigenous cultures in America, um, people in the Mississippi. I love me some Delta blues. Well, maybe we'll talk about the blues too sometime. Um, that culture, again, AD around 13 to 1550, they would also tattoo their faces. Interestingly enough, and this is like not just that Mississippian, but a few other um, tribes as well, would tattoo their face so that they could capture the soul of anyone they killed in battle. Which is like, whoa. But I mean, it's just kind of crazy how variant these expressions are from throughout the world, but yet similar to now, it's like, what I'm doing with the ashes, people use it to express all kinds of things or nothing at all. That's like a thing now, just to sort of get stuff you think is cool, like a Tasmanian devil drinking a beer or something, and like just do that. So it's very interesting to me. But anyhow, um, face tattoos were also about celebrating everlasting life. So this is where it becomes interesting to me. These images would often take the form of a bird. Love me some birds. See my birds back there. So I think the bird is the next one for me. Um, I'm also gonna get a hummingbird for my mother with her ashes. So yeah, this is really cool to me. So anyhow, they related the Birdman deity that who represents the triumph of life over death, with the world beginning anew each day with the rising sun and the singing of the birds. So I love that. And so that's going to be something I'm going to do for sure. I actually wore my hummingbird, my tribal design hummingbird today, and yeah. So I just really like that one. So all right, let's continue forward. So when did it hit us as a culture? In a modern way. So this becomes a whole different ball game when we start talking about that. But even Samoa, the Samoans, like I said, they have also been tattooing for thousands of years, and it's very very integral to their culture. Um, so you know, it's just pretty amazing. I want to touch back really quick before we move forward on Egypt again. Um, so the mummified body of the priestess Hathor suggests that the markings could have been treatment for pelvic peritonitis. I'm just fascinated by the Egyptians. I'm telling you what, it's something that I just cannot get around. When I was in art school, it was like I did so much Egyptian based and Egyptian symbolism in my art. So um, that you know, to me, it's just very interesting that it was not just decorative; that it was also, a type of perhaps like medical practice. So okay, so let's move on to the current, to the now. Um, so it looks like it began in 1600. Firemen, laborers, and prostitutes wore tattoos to communicate their status in Japan. And so that's kind of where it began to become popular with European sailors around 1691. Um, a sailor by the name of William Dampier was responsible for reintroducing the practice of tattooing to Western societies by bringing a fully tattooed man to London by the name of Prince Giolo, who became like super famous in the London scene. And almost 100 years later, um, Captain James Cook, which I'm sure many people have heard of, made several trips to the South Pacific to see these tattooed people for himself. He brought another tattooed Polynesian man to London, and once again, that man became a thing. He became pretty famous. And so the upper class citizens of Europe started getting tattooed in discreet places. So I think this is really cool. So this is like around 1766 that this is happening. Um, so Captain Cook was the first to transmit the meaning of the word tattoo to the Western world. According to his diary, both sexes would tattoo their body uh, by inlaying the color of black under their skins. So again, we're starting to see how this transferred from the tribal cultures historically, and perhaps even royalty and things like that, or like we said before, criminals or whatever the expression was. It's just across the board seems like, it's been quite a long time that humans have been doing this. So during the 1800s, the popularities of tattoos seemed to begin to decline, and this is where it began to be a symbol of freak culture, which I think it even, that relates to we'll discuss this, but to the modern times, I think that still was holding relative until probably like, the 90s, even, I'd say, wherein it began to then turn over in the last 30 years to all kinds of people again. So I love the revolution and how it continues. And now I think a lot of people, like express their spirituality and their internal selves on their outer bodies, their history, their family. I mean, all of these things I think can be relative to how people use tattoos today. So the first recorded professional tattoo artist in the U.S. was in 1846. Martin Hildebrandt started tattooing as a sailor aboard, an American ship. He also tattooed soldiers in the Civil War. I mean, like, I don't know. To me, I just like love to think about something like this. Like, somebody needs to make a movie. So, any filmmakers out there, maybe I'll suggest this to my daughter Gaia because she's really into filmmaking. But like a movie about a Civil War tattoo artist, like that would be so cool. So, Martin Hildebrandt established a shop at 77 James Street on the corner of Oak in Manhattan. Any New Yorkers? So that's where the first tattoo parlor was recorded. I'm sure there was, much more than that we just don't know about. But it looks like he worked there for 5 years, and this is believed that it was the first place for tattooing, at least in the U.S. And then in 1880, he was tattooing at 36 and a half Oak Street. And by then, tattooing was looked at as a mark of wealth. So again, so interesting to me how it just like vacillates between between a mark of like high society and a mark of freak, then to a, you're a criminal or a prostitute. I mean, it's just so varied. Or you're a god or goddess, or you know priest or priestess, or whatever they want to, that culture might have, coined their religious or spiritual clergy. It's just phenomenally interesting. So um then Samuel O'Reilly, next tattoo artist, he began tattooing in New York around the mid 1880s and had made his name by the end of the decade. He owned a shop on Broadway and the Bowery in New York City. And in 1891, he secured the first tattoo machine patent. Okay, so this 1891, the first machine. So up until then, it was still, predominantly the stick and poke concept that we're talking from ancient times till this point in time. And he used Thomas Edison's rotary stencil pen to create a tattoo machine. So up until then, like I said, it was this very stick and poke, the hand poke method, where you may get pierced around, 50 to 200 times per minute, the dots, where this rotary machine brought that high number up to 3,000, times per minute. So that's pretty amazing, actually, for the time frame. And then, again, more tattoo artists began to, appear at that time. And so then in the early 1900s, tattoos again began to decline in popularity. Now, I think this is where the health concern, really took a hold. We're looking at, the Industrial Revolution, and, medical advances are beginning to be made, and people are really starting to like understand the body and as from a scientific perspective. So parlors were located in the slums of cities, and people began to consider tattoos with being sleazy. The view on tattoos became so bad that it went underground. It was done in secret for those few that were even interested anymore in actually, getting tattooed. And this is due to, here we go, these parlors not necessarily following sanitary codes, and outbreaks of Hep C and blood poisoning and other diseases were being related and sourced back to these parlors. So when people heard about this, I mean, and of course back then, remember, people are dying of the flu and colds and stuff. I mean, we weren't that advanced medically, so it was still quite a risk. I can't imagine, what Hep C looked like back then or whatever. And with everything else going on, we still didn't have like flushing toilets and stuff. So I'm sure that was like a big deal. It's still a big deal today, honestly. So anyhow, this even spread out to the freaks. The freaks were the ones that were like, even like, I don't think so. I think we'll pass on the tattoo thing for now. So basically, nobody wanted tattoos, and the credibility just hit the ground. So by 1899, they were serving subpoenas on tattoo artists, claiming that, they were, a harm, some type of harm to society. Even, the creator of the tattoo gun was being sued, so by the state. So claiming that he had infringed on, that they were infringing upon patents and stuff. So there was just really like, a sort of like COINTELPRO style. Oh, there's another one. Like, I'm constantly coming up with new subjects, guys. Like it's every single episode. I'm like, that's a good one. So anyhow, they were just trying to bring it down. They were really trying to like stop it, whether that's, through the means of, basically basic charges all the way into patent infringement. So really trying to bring these guys down. So There were arrests were being made for tattooing at this time, 1902. So basically, in 1914, Grimm Tattoo Shop in Kansas City was opened. And by 1922, Jessie Knight was the first recorded female tattoo artist in the UK. She was primarily, tattooing sailors from all over the world. And then by 1930, we have Sailor Jerry. And anyone who, looks into sort of traditional tattoo styles and stuff, I'm sure you know who Sailor Jerry is. And so, yeah, in 1936, Life magazine said that 6% of people were tattooed. Most were in circuses, carnivals, and freak shows, often earning $200 a week, which is equivalent to $2,000 a week now, approximately, to just, go be a freak in the freak show. I know Gaia like really wanted to be in the circus and be in the freak show when she was a kid, like fully obsessed with it. She still, I think, desires that. So, and even though she had, actually given up tattooing in 1931 for her husband as she got married, she started gaining popularity in the 40s. So, yeah, we're moving forward now into the 1940s and 50s, and it's starting to really, cross the country. In the summer of 1949, Tahiti Felix sets up a tattoo parlor just south of Los Angeles and San Diego, and brings it to the California coast. So, yeah, I mean, I can continue to go on with all of this, but, I encourage you, I have included links below to kind of look at all of this. But, it goes through talking about how this, how tattooing gained popularity in the US starting in the 50s, really. And again, it was like bikers and sailors and stuff like that. But then, you know, by the 60s, it's mentioning Janis Joplin, who got a tattoo of a heart and the wristlet, which is, it's like, I have that heart chakra. And my very first tattoo that I ever wanted was actually a wristlet bracelet. And so she was tattooed by Lyle Tuttle. And that began like another, or they're citing that as an early moment of popular culture re-adopting tattooing and the feminine as well. Because like I said before, in Egypt and stuff, it was very much a feminine art of royalty, and mostly it seems royalty. And so, even up until when I started getting tattooed in the 90s, it was still looked at as something like I don't know, for lack of better terms, like only like trashy women or whatever did, And so to me, like, I don't know, I never bought into that type of thing. But anyhow, so tattoos become by the 70s to become more mainstream. The Rolling Stone talks about the tattoo renaissance and Lyle Tuttle with a two pages of photos, as well as like a large inside front cover pic. So here we go. We're really moving forward now. And then 1974, Ed Hardy opens his first custom shop in San Francisco. And I have a very good friend of mine who actually has an Ed Hardy tattoo. It's so amazing. It's like this Native American. He's half Native, so it's this Native on the back of his on his entire. It's like a back piece, and the Native actually has tribal tattooing on his body, and it actually fades into the exact same tribal tattoos across the buttocks and down the legs. So it was super cool. Very good work. Anyhow, the first tattoo convention was actually held in January of 1976 in Houston, Texas. And this event apparently is considered an event that changed the world of tattooing forever. So, we're moving forward. And so by the 90s, it's becoming a big thing. There's world tattoo conventions happening. The 20th anniversary of the first World Tattoo Convention in Texas was 1996, and it becomes an increasingly popular by 1997. Now, this is around when I was getting 1992 was the first time I got tattooed. And so, yeah, it begins to move forward. And as it says here, the 2000s, the popularity of tattoos increases dramatically. And this is what I've observed as well. This is sort of why I decided to do this. It's really amazing how, you know, when I didn't get my wristlet because I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. That could like literally prevent me from being able to achieve what I'd like to achieve in life. You know what I mean? So, it was something I didn't do. When I got this tattoo, on my arm, it was actually because I had all these surgeries on that arm and there was all these scars. And, I was really just like over the whole surgical, experience. And so that was like my way of saying no more. But when I got it, I mean, what I said exactly was, I know I'm not going to be a banker. So, let's do it. And now, I have both arms, but, it's just amazing how I go into a hospital and, 3 out of 5 nurses have sleeves. And, I mean, it's just everywhere now, professionals and everyone. It's not just like artists, freaks, musicians, bikers, and all that. The under or whatever could be considered the sort of underbelly or counterculture. It's not just that anymore. And I think that's super cool. So according to a survey done in 2010, 36% of Americans aged 18 to 50 were actually tattooed. And 40% of 18 to 29-year-olds were tattooed. More women than men at that point. And now have tattoos than men. I mean, more women have tattoos than men. I find that to be so fascinating, the circular nature, once again. So, it is much more socially acceptable. And tattoo artists are actually being considered fine artists. And I think that's just amazing because, man, there are some really amazing artists like on Instagram and stuff. Maybe I'll go back and edit to link some of those, some of my favorites, people that I would love, if I ever win the lottery, hit it big, I'll be hitting them up for some pretty sick work. But a good friend of mine has a tattoo shop over in Morro Bay, and he's the one that does all of my tattoos, or the majority of them at this point. His name's Brian Wilkinson. Shout out to Brian. He just opened a shop, and I'm having a brain fart right now, but it's like a tiger monkey, I think it's called, but it's right there in Morro Bay on the drag. And he's super cool. So anybody in that area, go check him out. So now, it's like a super sanitary experience, and it's very, very rare if you go to a professional shop that you're going to actually, like get some type of disease, especially with like HIV and some of the other bloodborne illnesses that we have today. They're very, very, they very much pay attention and are very aware of what, could be transmitted. So, you still want to, check it out. If it looks dirty, if they're not wearing gloves, if they don't open a new needle for you, you just get up and go. So yeah, I really feel like now, according to a 2015 poll, 1 in 3 Americans have a tattoo, and half of all millennials. So bring it, millennials, bring it. I think this is pretty cool. So, to me, I know I kind of rushed through and maybe it seemed a little bit like, back and forth, but so much information. And I find it to be so fascinating to look back into this. And again, they don't know, human history can only really be documented back about 5,000 to 7,000 years as far as these types of details. The existence of humans, of course, we're learning all the time about our history. So that will be, again, another episode. Perhaps tomorrow. I was thinking about kind of just looking into that a little bit more and sort of, like what's believed, what's solid, and what they're finding as well, is that kind of goes back to, I mean, hundred, thousands, tens of thousands of years ago, and what humans were, and there was art and there was expression. So this is something I find really interesting. So we will talk about it again, in the future in a more extensive way, even like RH negative blood and when that occurred on the planet and things like that. So stay tuned. I'd also like to talk about ancient cultures and their belief systems, and how I find it really, really interesting that many of them believe they are from, you know, other planets, star systems, and, you know, the idea that it's way before Star Trek, right? It's way before we started talking about that type of thing. So I'd love to talk more about that. So stay tuned for that. But I think that pretty much wraps it up. I hope you guys had fun. It's a little bit, less serious topic today, because we did go through 3 pretty serious topics before. So have a great day. I hope you have a great Monday. And I will see you here tomorrow. I will likely be doing it in the morning again. So, if you're a morning person, grab your coffee, your tea, and come on over. And like I said, it'll be kind of a surprise topic. I will slate it tonight. So if you're interested, come check it out and see what I've decided to do. But thanks so much again. I really appreciate you for being here. And please comment, like, and share if you do enjoy these little discussions. And, let me know also, again, anything you want to hear about, you want to talk about. I am very interested in sharing like a Zoom link ahead of time on topics for people to join us and actually, get to hold the stick and talk about their experiences, their perspectives, and, and then share that over here for everyone else to enjoy who couldn't make it. So stay tuned for that as well. Alrighty. I, again, really appreciate you. Thanks for showing up. And like I say every time, all we can do is show to grow and glow and, become unified in our community experience and in our hearts as humans. So thanks again, and I'll see you soon. Bye.